right, good afternoon. Welcome back. I hope you had a good lunchtime conversations and hopefully a good lunch. And we have another very exciting plenary panel, set of talks. I realize that not only my own information processing capacity is hard to do for 3 introductions in a row. I noticed people forgot whom I've introduced, so I'm actually going to do it one at a time to give everybody proper introductions. It's my great honor and pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Annabelle Gower, who is a professor of digital economy at the University of Surrey. Annabelle and I know each other also for a very long time, since graduate school days. Feels like my club at this point in time. Annabelle is a world leader in the strategy topics relating to platform strategy. She was one of the pioneers who started talking about Microsoft and software business more broadly for us to understand it as a platform strategy business from her PhD days with her first book. And now she just released her 4th book. I got that right? And the new book is called The Business of Platforms. And it's a must-read like other books I've been mentioning. They are cutting-edge thinking on this topic. And I'm sure that Annabelle will give us a little bit of a taste for how great the content is in the book. So without further ado, I'd love for us to welcome Professor Gower. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia. It's a pleasure to be here. And I haven't been at NYU since the CCC at NYU. I believe it must have been in 1999. So this is really great to be back. And also, it's a great day. I think the program is fantastic. I thought Marshall's talk was amazing. The talks by, the speaker this morning, Aya, Melissa. I'm forgetting somebody who's going to kill me later, but this was really good. A lot of the context for why platforms matter has been brilliantly described, I think, by Marshall this morning. So I'm going to go very quickly on that, and I'm going to try to make us go a little beyond into, so what do we do now? Okay, so this is, yes, a new book that just came out in June, co-authored with Mike Kusumano, who's my former PhD supervisor. He's professor at MIT, and joining the team, David Yaffe from Harvard Business School. It's particularly gratifying to be in a platforms conference because in 2008, I organized, when I was at Imperial College London, the very first platform conference that ever happened on these topics. And then Marshall, Van Alstyne, and Jeff Parker, joined later with Andre Hadju, have taken up that tradition and have every year made a fantastic platforms research conference and a corporate event afterwards. And now here you're doing this. So this is really great. So the key message of this book is platforms are a double-edged sword. Yes, of course, platforms are the best strategic option today if what you want to do is build a $1 trillion company. And the best way also to lose a fortune. Right? So we're thinking about, this subsidizing, subsidize right, subsidize left. The more you subsidize, the more people come and the more money you lose. Right? It's also the best way if what you really want is undermine democracy. And it's fantastic if you want to promote violence. Right? So this is coming from somebody who has been spending the last 25 years studying platforms. And I think the reason why I was really, really excited to study platforms is because, as we all know now, this is a fantastic mechanism of value creation, as Marshall brilliantly showed. When we teach strategy, you know that we talk about value creation and we also talk about value capture, right? So we mustn't forget to ask the question about value capture. And we also, I think, need to go beyond what are becoming more and more cliches, such as, these are business models that allow you to do everything without owning anything, right? And yes, of course, we see companies such as, Uber, the largest taxi companies, they don't own any taxi. Airbnb, the largest hospitality business, they don't own any rooms. We've been through that. You're going to have a lot less assets. It's all external. Do you know how many employees Amazon has? How many assets? 600,048,000 employees. We're not talking about the 13 employees that started Instagram. Okay? So I think we need to take on board everything we've heard about fundamental mechanisms of value creation, and then we need to pay a little more attention to, in context, are all platforms exactly that? Marketplaces and intermediary owning no assets? No. Is this the future of business in society? I hope not. Does that force us to rethink very profoundly what we take for granted it is what is a firm? Absolutely. What does that mean to be a firm? That legal concept that we have that evolved over centuries, that involves a bundle of responsibility, that has very deeply held assumption about ownership, and the talk about Aya this morning, ownership as the way of control, that differentiate firms from markets where the locus of production is what the firm does, and the locus of exchange is that sea of market outside. When we have now those entities that internalize the market and bring it home. Yes? And that are, yes, the top 7 top market capitalization valued company in the world today. Yes, they are all platform. But the word value can't be taken at face value. And we would be fools to equate today's market capitalization of a company like Uber to value. In particular, because value is something that lies in the eye of the beholder, as we know from economics. Your willingness to pay is not my willingness to pay. And so platforms are a fantastically important topic that forces us to think deeply about things we took for granted. And so I just want to have a few ideas that I want to throw out to you, and I want each and every one of you to buy the book as well. And talk about it into your network so it becomes viral. There's been a platform explosion. We all know that. Yeah. They're everywhere. Have they changed who wins? Yes. Marshall explained extremely well. You know, in the past century, in the past 50 years, who were those top companies? They were the infrastructure companies. Okay? Today's infrastructures are those digital platforms. These are the 5 most valuable firms today, all platforms. The argument of the book, for those who don't want to buy it, big mistake, but here it is. The most valuable companies in the world are all platform companies. You know that. Platforms have the potential to be winner-take-all, and in work that Marshall and Jeff have explained, very important, they've really clarified that they don't all become winner-take-all markets, and so it depends on whether there is not only strong network effect, but whether people can multi-home, as Hannah was talking about this morning. If you both can have Lyft and Uber on your phone, and it's costless for you to switch, that's going to diminish the likelihood of a winner-take-all. And also whether there's a potentiality for niche differentiation. So we understand that. Then a fundamental idea of the book is that platforms come in 3 flavors. One is what I call transaction platforms, which are those online marketplaces who are helping different sides of the market to connect. These are the Airbnbs. These are the Uber. This is Amazon Marketplace. And then there is something else, which is an innovation platform. And so far in the literature, that distinction has been quite blurred and, frankly, a little bit confusing. And an innovation platform is like an iOS or an Android, something which is a shared technological asset on top of which other people can build stuff. In the world we live in, other people can build stuff. That means software can be built on top of it. And therefore, potentiality for innovation on top of it. When you have an Uber or Airbnb, what's happening on each side is not we're going to add new rooms to Airbnb, but we're not going to reinvent what the concept of a room is. So it's a transaction between existing goods and existing services. Okay? And so I'm going to explain why that's important if we really want to understand how platforms create value, transaction, innovation, and also hybrid. So when you see actually the most powerful platforms of the day, you will see they have both a transaction platform and an innovation platform. So Google has Google Android, which is an innovation platform, and they have Google Store, which is a transaction platform. Apple has iOS, which is an innovation platform, also have the App Store. And those feedback loops that we've been hearing and talking about this morning, whether we call them network effect, whether we call them economies of scale in demand, whether we call them economies of scale crossing between demand and supply, those feedback loops we like so much because they are a self-sustaining engine of growth. We find them also between an innovation platform and a transaction platform. Then we find that it's a book for the layman and laywoman. So we have a very simple, pretty effective framework about what are the 4 steps you need to follow if you want to build a platform business. And then, we have a chapter on failure. We find that failure is much more likely than winner take all, and we have some data on that. There are hundreds of failures versus a very small number of winners. So all of you guys, super enthusiastic, wet behind the ears MBAs who want to make the next million by doing a platform, some of you will succeed, most won't. Just because you have the word platform in your business model is not a magic powder that's going to make everything work. Sorry. All dogs can learn new tricks, and that's really the challenge of the next 10 years, especially in these B2B businesses like 5G and Internet of Things, et cetera, et cetera. So we say they can build platform, buy platform, or belong to platform. And platform are a double-edged sword. There's a whole chapter about the abuse of power in platforms, which is really, I think, very important. And that is not just a policy issue. And I don't care whether you're pro-government or not pro-government. Every business person has to understand when they want to build a platform what's going to be the regulatory environment that they're facing. Every user and every citizen has to understand how these new modalities of creation of value and capture of value are changing our lives. So that we talk about the different abuses of power, whether it's a B2B type of bullying, like booking, delisting this hotel just because. Or poor labor practices. Somebody had a great question about what happens to the workers. Are we really creating value when we are asking people to perform labor, except now it's precarious, and they get monitored in a surveillance type of capitalism to a degree that was never envisionable? Is that really value creation? What do we put behind this word value? And then, obviously, there's the question of trust, or governance of the platform, maintaining trust, and the different trade-offs associated with that. On the one hand, you want to have, perhaps if you're a platform owner, a lot of openness, so everybody can come in, and you have more network effects. On the other hand, that's going to create problems, because you're not going to be able to control that as well, the sort of bad actor problem. And then there's just plain divergent incentives between a firm that wants to capture money from your data and users who didn't quite realize the extent to which their privacy was not respected. So that's what the book is about. We have chapters for each of these. Don't read just to show you the work's been done. It's there. It's findable. So defining platform, we've heard that throughout all day. You can, an intermediary, they connect different sides of the market. They can reduce transaction costs. They generate value by exploiting network effects and feedback loops. And there are direct interactions across multiple sides. This is a graph from Marshall and Jeff Parker from a few years ago. These are what I call the transaction platforms, multi-sided markets with network effects. And this is the work from Andre Hadju, really clear distinction between what a platform is. Because if you say you have connecting different sides, doesn't any firm connect different sides? Doesn't any firm has buyer and seller? And I think that's the case. Is every firm a platform? So this is helpful to distinguish between a vertically integrated firm, a reseller, an MSP, which facilitates affiliation across the side, and an input supplier. And then there are the platforms I had been working on all along, which now I call innovation platform, which come from this concept of, remember a product family? A Black & Decker series of tools. They reuse the same handheld core, and then you can add different add-ons. Okay? If you build a car, the way automotive manufacturing has been organized is around these manufacturing platforms. Every time there is a new model of a car, they don't go back from the drawing board and start it from scratch. They reuse what they call a platform, which is a core set of an architecture and components, and it's like the core of something, which they keep and reuse across models, but then they change little things on the side to customize it. And we all do that. That's called economies of scope, right? This presentation I'm making today, do you think I made every single slide new from scratch? Of course not. Of course I changed the first slide and I put the right name of the conference. I also changed other things. So we all reuse, right? And there are economies from reusing, right? So the concept of innovating on the platform is not necessarily happening neither in digital nor in an ecosystem. You can even have that within a firm. You can have that within a supply chain. And what's really interesting today is you can have that in the whole world. Why? Because we're living in a digital economy. We are all interconnected to the internet. Everybody can program, and everybody's connected to a mobile device. Something's really interesting about digital is that not only, in addition to what we heard this morning, and the talk by Youngjin Yu later is going to clarify these things even more, but what happens when you consume data? For example, you're driving and you're looking at Waze and it says, don't take 51st Street because the UN is here. You are consuming data, but you're also generating data. Some people know they are, some people don't know they are, but you're generating data about your speed, about your location, and therefore that data that is being generated in the context of use is used by some firms some firms are very good at this, some firms are not good at this. They use that data, which is your output, as a further input to better off their service. So as we are all driving with Waze, and Waze, the central database, gets this input about everybody is going at just 0.1 mile an hour on this road. Usually it's 15 miles an hour. They change the map. Now it's orange, now it's red. And then they say, cool algorithms go around. So what's happening is that users generate data as they consume it. Data is an input that does not get depleted. So that's what economists call non-rival good as it is consumed, as it's used to improve the services. This is a graph showing you what I mentioned before about transaction platforms and innovation platforms. In the transaction platform, it serves as an intermediary for direct exchange or transactions subject to network effect. In the innovation platform, the platform serves as a technological foundation upon which other firms can develop complementary innovation. If you're a manager or an entrepreneur or an investor, why should you care? Well, you should care because the different steps you're going to go through, which we go to in our model, choose your side, launch the platform by solving the chicken and egg problem, which is bringing sides on board, choose your business model, i.e. how you monetize and how do you govern. These are actually distinct, whether you are trying to build an innovation platform and a transaction platform. And I obviously don't have the time to go into how are they different, but that's chapter 3. So you have to choose your platform type, okay? That's the first decision you got to make. Then, we have some data in the book about the fact that, yes, platforms have distinctive performance in terms of market. And, whether we're looking at return on sales or whether we're looking at mean valuations, they overperform with non-platforms. And this is the slide that Marshall borrowed earlier this morning. We see also a distinction. Yes, of course, platforms have fewer employees than non-platforms. Yes, their market valuation is greater, and their growth sales is greater. And we also see distinct performance between innovation platforms and transaction platforms. For example, transaction platforms have typically fewer employees. And the R&D investment of innovation platforms is usually higher. What we see also, when you look at transaction platforms, innovation platform, and what we call hybrid, very different patterns. Transaction, lots of little firms. Innovation, a few big firms. Hybrid, a very small number of huge firms. And moving on to the question of power and responsibility, 2 minutes, fine. Power and responsibility, how did we go from just a few years ago being enamored with Mark Zuckerberg? Do you remember people were talking seriously about him going for president? This was Time Person of the Year. And now we're like, how did we go from darling mavericks to evil ogres? Epic fail. There is a mood change. Maybe in Europe the mood changed earlier because we had no succeeding platform, so we were getting nervous before. You guys are getting nervous too. Rightly so. So there is a pushback, not just from regulators, but from citizens. There is this fantastic book written by Shoshana Zuboff from Harvard University called Surveillance Capitalism, making the point that we are all being involved in some sort of very vast-scale experiment where our every actions and moods is being monitored and monetized, and there is a real instrumentation of human beings subject to this market logic, which is on steroid with platforms. There's been several antitrust, 3 of them against Google with fines. Some people say, is this going to change anything, these fines? It's just a drop into the ocean. And I have 4 more slides, but very quickly. One is, let's think about work in the age of digital platforms. Is this the end of traditional firms? These transaction platforms, they blur the distinction between market and organizations. We're getting towards a transaction-based logic of what an organization is. Is this all transactable, monetizable, reducible to data? We are seeing a rise of surveillance, capitalism, and algorithmic management. Are we going towards a world where everybody's a contractor? Nobody's a salaried person? How do we create a society or maintain a society with rights to people who work in a society where there is a huge disconnect between lots of people who help create value and a concentration of the value capture? And what kind of responsibilities do we need to have towards workers? In terms of platforms and regulation, some, for example, Ben Edelman, who used to be at Harvard Business School, said that a bunch of the profits that a lot of these platforms has made is just because they're dodging regulation. They don't pay tax, or they didn't pay tax. They try to weasel themselves out of sectoral regulation, and therefore they didn't pay the same kind of due to society that other person did. And I think one thing is fair, whether or not one believes that, we're coming out of a sort of Wild West period of platform capitalism. And so those companies that want to either create the platforms of the next 10 years or succeed, they're going to have to realize that the environment that we are in, both from an awareness of the consumer side, a retaliation desire from the incumbents, and a regulatory regime are completely different than 10 years ago. And there's a huge amount of lobbying involved because this is big money and very contested. There are big issues around privacy, online harm, and fraud. And the debate about privacy has brought that, we didn't used to care about privacy, and now we do. But we have to understand that the infrastructure of civilized society that we take for granted today, whether it is clean water, road, or railroads, they didn't come out fully formed. They were obtained through a long process where people decided that I think this should be a right now. These were not rights from birth 500 years ago. So there is a big, profound debate about what is to be treated as a shared resource. And I think because of the fundamentally different nature of data in the way it creates value, the difficulty to own it, the way we control assets and resources without having to resort to the traditional structures of firms, and the way code is law, to use the word of Lawrence Lessig from Harvard Law School, those regulatory decisions and the interface designs that the platforms makers make, they both make the law and they apply the law. And a principle of governance from all the way, Montesquieu, about what is a non-totalitarian state is the principle of separation of power, that the judicial is not the same as the police, right? So we need to rethink the implication of that in this setting. So given the dominance and centrality of platforms, what should regulators do? Have they become a de facto essential facilities? Should data be treated as a common good? The mood has changed, and beyond economic power, there is real issues of political power. Power to scrutinize, power to survey, power to influence. And there is this issue of the lack of power of governments to actually implement regulation because the platforms cut across the regulatory the territories. Last slide, summary thought of platform power. Network effects exist. They are fantastic engines of value creation. They do not always lead to winner-take-all markets, but we do see a few dominant firms having accrued an enormous power. We can attest of an enormous amount of instances of abuse of dominance. As a few online platforms have achieved centrality and dominance, society is asking them to act responsibly and fairly. It's going to be good business for them to do so as well. So in the book, we advocate for self-regulation in more detail. But collaboration between firms and regulatory agency, so a combination of self-regulation and real regulation is happening, and it's going to be for the good. Thank you. Any questions? Rob.
Annabelle, thanks for your talk. Provocative as always. And so let me try to return some of the provocation.
Please.
So you had a list of 6 big takeaways, and you're sort of, at the very end, you touched on number 6. Number 6.
Was that this slide or?
No, it was way at the beginning.
Oh, at the beginning.
Yep. And so number 6.
Okay, these were just the chapters of the book, but fine, yes. Okay. Oops, did I do something wrong? I did. Yes.
Okay. So number 6 was, so you talk about this as a double-edged sword, and so so obviously there's a lot of good things, and then number 6, what you're touching on is all the bad, sort of bad things, if you will. So I guess, the question is, well, what's the counterfactual? So imagine a world with no platforms, hard to imagine, but just imagine, for the sake of argument, a world with no platforms. I would posit that there would still be abuse of power. This was one of the things you had up there.
Oh, for sure.
Poor labor practices, bad actors, counterfeits.
For sure.
And so I guess I'm pushing back on the double-edged sword piece.
I agree with you. I was not saying that the notion of abuse of power has been invented by platform, because I don't believe it has. I was identifying a specific set of ways in which platform can be abused in and by platforms. This is what abuse of power looks like in this context. And guess what? We see a lot of it. So that's what I was trying to do. I wasn't suggesting that a world without platform would free us of these types of abuse. For example, the question about even the contractor versus employee. FedEx and UPS. There was a huge, I learned that when I was writing this chapter, which I didn't know. There were huge class action lawsuits against UPS. The UPS drivers, they wear the UPS uniform. UPS tell them what to do, where to do. I thought they were employees of UPS. Contractors. And so we have bargaining power, asymmetric power situation in all sorts of situations. And that happens within the firms too. Don't we all know it? Right? So I really agree with you that it is not to say, oh, platform is bad. Is bad happens in the world. With the platform thing, which is here to stay, that's what it looks like. Yes, madam. You had the question about workers earlier on, yes?
Yeah, that's my question. I'm curious, in your research about platforms and the more powerful ones, the ones that, were early practitioners, we're hearing about how their development of AI is advancing rather rapidly, but it's all under wraps. These platforms may talk about the wonders of transparency, but they are never transparent about the, their artificial intelligence. So how do you see that playing out over time? Do you think?
Can you make your question a bit more precise than how do I see that evolve over time?
Well, I'm just wondering, there's concern about how algorithms can be unfair.
Yes.
But if Amazon never tells you, how they're designing the algorithms, and if Google doesn't tell you, how can you determine to what degree or if indeed they are being unfair?
Okay.
So.
Okay, I understand your question. Very good question. And you're absolutely right that the propaganda of everybody should be open except me is on. Everybody believes that. Everybody understands that. You've got to be really naive if you don't. Now, about AI and algorithms, and Rob Siemens here, Professor Rob Siemens, has done a lot of great work about this. Just like any new technology, whether it is like the telephone or vaccine or TV, you're going to have people who are going to say, it's awful, it's going to break everything, it's everything bad about the world is going to come out. It's going to be demonic. And you've got people who say, yeah, this is the pathway to heaven, right? And so with AI, I tell you what changes are happening in the regulation about transparency. Okay? So for example, the opacity of some of these algorithms, for example, in Facebook or in Google or on ranking algorithms, for example, in the European Union, there is some new regulation that is coming out, so a new one called P2B, Platform to Business Regulation, asking for more collaboration from platforms and more transparency as to what goes into the decisions to delist somebody, for example. Okay? So the direction of travel is there's going to be more pushback on more transparency. And that's going to be played out into all sorts of debates where some people say it's impossible. We even don't know what the machine does. It's all this voodoo magic. How could we possibly be liable, right? So the whole question about liability and transparency is very current. And there's going to be more pushback towards more transparency, and it's going to be more contested.
Sorry,
Yep.
just to stay on track,
Sure.
it's a book worth of presentation and of questions.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for sharing your insights. We should still buy the book. We can't cheat and just look at the slide.
Still.
I'm telling people. Thank you. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is going to be quite different, I believe, from the academic talks you've just heard. Jihoon Rim was a CEO of Kakao, one of the leading platforms and the leading platform in Korea that was providing mobile messaging as well as music streaming services, Melon, ride-sharing services. So every theme we talked about academically and theoretically, Jihoon has lived it. We're now very lucky to have him here at Stern. He just joined the Fubon Center and Stern as executive in residence. He's leading a super successful and popular new course on managing high-tech companies. Just you have several pages worth of accomplishments at your very young age, but just to give people a sense about how significant your industry career has been, and hopefully your academic will be as well. Jihoon was named #1 in 2017 as Korea's best CEO, and this is just one of many recognitions he has received for running this company for 3 years, doubling his revenues. So we have a wealth of from on-the-ground knowledge of what it means to run a platform business, and we can contrast it, and at least in our heads, with what we heard theoretically. So please welcome Jihoon Rim.
Thank you, Natalia. I'm flattered. And I'll start with a question, and I know I might not like the response. How many of you actually know Kakao? Ooh, impressive. Great. So anyways, quickly, even though she slightly introduced, Kakao is a big company. It's not a startup. It's a public company valued around more than $10 billion US, have more than 5,000 employees. And the most famous service is Kakao Talk, which is a mobile messenger, has 44 million users. By the way, for information, Korean population is 50 million. So if you really think about it, except the babies who don't have a smartphone, everybody's using it. Not only that, we are the #1 ride-hailing service. We have Kakao Taxi, which has 10 million users. Kakao Bank, which doesn't have a single physical branch. It's digital-only bank. And we have more than 10 million customers. Not only that, the music streaming service, the #2 search engine. And it doesn't stop here. Actually, this is a screenshot of my Kakao Talk. And if you look at it, we have almost everything, all platforms, right? Hair shop reservation, hospital reservation, ticketing, food delivery, you name it, we have it. And in each respective market, we are #1 or #2. I can talk about Kakao for 30 minutes, but I'll now focus on platforms. I meet a lot of startups or like executives for big companies, and they all kind of fantasize platforms. And they're saying that, hey, I think I should do a platform in this vertical market because I don't see any player over here. Or I'm a big company now. I think we also should develop a platform. And we kind of tend to think that platform is the best way to do business. It's innovative, and like the more open it is, it's more better. You kind of have that kind of sense. But with my experience, I just wanted to share what I think about platforms, and there might be slightly difference that you have to think a little bit more than that. So 3 things. Even though we study and we come to conferences like this today and learn about platforms, even though you learn all the most advanced characteristics, attributes of platform, a lot of the time, the nature of its business, the nature of its vertical business is more important than the the key parts of platform. For example, let's say a lot of people might think that ride-hailing services, handyman services, babysitting services are all similar. We normally put that in one category, right? It's like gig economy, on-demand economy. Sometimes it's called like sharing economy. But think a little bit more, follow me. Uber or Lyft, if you really think about it, what's the key of it? What's the beauty of it? It's the on-demandness, right? You just call it, you get it right away. That's the reason you're not taking taxis. And that created a huge new market. And you cannot bypass the platform. You have to get in the Uber car, right? Think about the handymans, house cleaners, plumbers. Even though you order it, you don't really need it right away. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. From that, already the value of the platform is slightly different. And if you have experienced, calling in some handyman or a handy woman, there's a lot of chances that they tell you that next time, could you please, contact me directly? This is my phone. So there is a chance that, they will be off the platform. What about babysitting or tutoring? It's a little bit more extreme. Platform is matching supply and demand, and it seems like becoming efficient, but the irony here is that once you have the best match, you both kind of leave the platform, right? You have a babysitter, you really want to keep that person. You want to keep that person for 3 years. There's no reason for you to be on the platform. So I'm not saying that platform is meaningless. All these platforms should be designed differently, and that comes from the nature of its vertical market. And what about local and global? Uber, when they were IPOing, they claimed that they're Amazon on transportation. Are they? If you really think about it, Uber is a global company, but they're operating locally. Winning New York City doesn't naturally translate into winning Washington, D.C., or LA, or San Francisco. They have to battle each local market, right? So it's different. The scale effect is different, even though they're a platform company. Amazon is like in the hybrid, and Facebook, Google, they're digital, right? They don't have a physical presence, so they have a total scale effect. So again, even though we say these are the platform companies rule the world, actually, in real, they're pretty different. Talking about the service platforms and content platforms, by nature, they're different. You already know that, right? And the second thing that I see a lot is that we mistakenly think that platforms are static. So we study a platform and think that, okay, these 3 are the key success factors of a platform, and you try to apply that into your business. But sometimes it works, even though that might be true. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because platforms, most of the time, evolves. I'll give you some examples. For example, YouTube in 2006, when it first came out, I'm not sure if you remember, it had a catchphrase saying that, broadcast yourself. So at that time, we saw tons of funny home videos, right? And then as YouTube became mainstream, most of the professional content players uploaded the video on YouTube, and then YouTube had to serve that category and participants and suppliers. So it evolved in that way. Now we have streaming. So every time it's changing. Airbnb, it began with renting your second home or your second room that was empty. Now, professional leasing companies buy buildings and units, and they're renting it on Airbnb. So the participants changed. The way it operates kind of changed. Not only that, there's a network called Facebook. Once upon a time, it was a network that you shared your photos with your friends. Now, it's not like that, right? It's a little bit more like a media platform. And actually, there was a time that you played games. You remember Farmville? Right? Everybody was playing Farmville on Facebook. But at that time, there was a certain time that Facebook changed their platform rule, and they kind of kicked out all the gaming companies. So it changed, right? And this is an example of my own. Kakao, as I said, it's a multi-business group, and our gaming revenue is more than $300 million US. But we had our ups and downs. In 2012, we launched our gaming platform. It became a huge success. most of the gaming company came to our platform. They opened up their game. It was kind of a free platform, open platform. But after a few years, the market became super crowded. We had thousands and thousands of games, and the smaller companies were having a hard time reaching customers. So then it kind of consolidated, and we had like a handful big gaming companies kind of dominating the market. They had the power, and suddenly some of them were starting to leave the platform. They are not launching their sequel game on our platform. Then as a platform, what should you do? Should you just stay and just say that, oh, we're a platform, like we're not gonna get involved in the platform, we just moderate or mediate? No. What we did, we had to make sure that the remaining gaming companies would get the customers and they could win, they can beat the gaming companies who left our platform, right? So we put all our resources, we borrowed the other digital platforms that we owned and tried to pool all the customers that we had into the gaming platform. Not only that, we heavily invested in gaming companies. We actually went into the value chain, acquired some companies, and proved that the platform itself is meaningful to the rest. So then we kind of had the turnaround story, and most of the gaming companies came back. So still, we're like the biggest gaming platform in South Korea. So again, the second part that I was saying is that you study a platform, you think that these three are gonna be like the key success factors. It could be, but it changes. It's not static, it evolves. And the third part is that even though nowadays we say that user experience is like the most important thing, customer-centric is the most important thing that you have to focus, but I'm not saying that it's not true, but when it comes to transactional platforms, you really have to focus on the money side. Really, the most basic common things. If your platform is more expensive, for example, are customers really willing to pay? Why? Why do we have to pay more? Our suppliers are really getting paid more. Are they earning more? Those kind of basic questions, you really have to think about it. And this is a perfect example, I believe, that Kakao, we had a mobile comic book service called Kakao Page. In 2013, we thought it would boom because actually we had a very good user experience. The design was so slick. We thought users are gonna love it, but we failed. So we closed the service. We brought in the content and we just thought that it will sell very well, but it didn't. It was not because of the design. So basically the content owners left the platform and there was nothing that we could do, so we closed it. And then we launched it, like a year later, we relaunched it with a different approach. First, we made sure that the content owners will earn more. So they already have their revenue stream, and we made sure that they will have more on top of that. So we made some special deals. I can't really get into the detail, but anyways, we made sure to make them committed. And also that, and the other thing that we did is that we changed the business model. Rather than selling per episode, we created a very interesting business model named Wait or Pay. So basically, we provided up to like 5 episodes for free, and up to some level from that point, you have to buy it, or if you wait a day, you'll get 1 episode for free every day. So it's kind of teasing, right? But at least from the user's perspective, you know what you're buying. Before, we were just saying that, we have the best user experience, like design, UI, so why don't you buy it? But now, it was slightly different. You know what you're buying. So that totally changed the market, and now the content owners developed a mobile-centric content, and we became like the largest platform in South Korea. This is quite astonishing. If you really think about it, it's the daily transaction volume of Kakao Page. It was $100,000 in 2015. Now it reached $1 million per day. So you could see how that changed. So these are the 3, it could be simple, but these are the things that I just wanted to emphasize because, again, I say now we're too much kind of fantasizing about platforms and thinking that whenever you do a platform, it will succeed. But I'm saying that you should go more deeper than that. And you really have to think about the key nature of its vertical business. You really have to think about the numbers. And you really have to, even though you learn a lot about successful platforms, like Airbnb succeeded by doing this, but you don't know like what they're doing right now. It changed. I'm pretty sure that it changed. So it's not like you could just apply some success factors into your business. You always have to think about how to serve your both sides of the markets. Thank you all very much. Questions? If you have any.
Can you talk about the nature of how your company's using data across the different markets you're operating in to see what market you're going into and or change the dynamics, so like the cross-domain thinking?
So as you can see, I said like 44 million people are using our Kakao Talk, so that's going to be the core. And if you think about it, we're doing the user profiling, so every user has the attributes, and we're collecting that. But that's not the key in deciding which market we're going to get into. That's just the pool. It's easier for us to reach them and market to them, but we don't use it as the decision to get into a vertical market. When it goes to like which vertical market we should pursue, it really depends on how that market is operating and if there's any inefficiency over there, or do you have a margin that you can squeeze? Let's say that the existing market already is kind of, the margin is so low, like 2%. How could you really squeeze margin out of that? It's a little bit difficult. So there are other factors that we chose when we entered the market.
How do you view multi-homing as a platform owner, basically either on the consumer side and the complementary side? Do you try to curb it, or are you happy with it?
Nobody could be happy about it, right? So, but it's difficult, but you have to face it. So you have to, there's no key success recipes that if you do this, multi-homing will be gone. But you really have to think about it and provide a unique way and lock in customers and also suppliers. And supplier side is sometimes a little bit more clear. If you kind of can own that supplier pool, it's mostly it's a better way to strengthen your platform. And when it comes to content businesses, definitely you can kind of have exclusivity. So it works sometimes.
What Kakao's relationship is with Google. So I suspect that in the Korean market, it's mostly through Android phones. And so does Kakao also have to go through Play Store? And what's the sort of arrangement? Is it any different from the US market, or is it kind of the same arrangement with Google?
It's a great, tricky question. I believe nobody's from Google here, right? We had our ups and downs. So we have to go through the Google market too. So if you were to think about the margin, it's getting squeezed, right? So sometimes we're collaborating, sometimes we're kind of, competing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jihoon. Very interesting. You even saved us a few minutes, which I really appreciate. So last but not least for this set of talks is Professor Yoonjin Yu from Case Western Reserve University. He is a chaired professor there of entrepreneurship and information systems. Yoonjin is a leading scholar in my community on topics pertaining to digital infrastructure, digital architectures. One of his papers sort of, I would say, started a field when you started talking about understanding generativity of digital infrastructures. And I believe the theme of generativity has been mentioned at least a few times today, so I'm sure you were happy to hear that. I also want to mention that Yoonjin is also a leader in terms of bringing in design and design perspective into the conversation about platforms. And so I am looking forward to your talk, because perhaps we're turning away a little bit from economics and learning a little bit about other issues. But without further ado, please welcome Yoon-Jing.
All right, thank you, Natalia. Thank you. So we will turn from economics to biology. So a quick plug, since you are all here for conference. So we recently, much of my work is focusing on working with legacy companies. We came up, that topic came up several times, disruptions or how incumbent firms should respond to these digital disruptions. So if you have nothing else to do in October 14th through 16th, we have a conference dedicated for legacy companies, mostly manufacturing companies. So we have a great lineup of speakers. So this is not academic speakers. It will be mostly executives who are actually leading their digital transformation within inside of old companies like Procter & Gamble, Goodyear, Eaton, Parker, Timken, etc. So John Deere, the guy who actually architected their tractor data architecture, is going to speak. So hopefully some of you will come. Anyway, this is our building, beautiful building designed by Frank Gehry, actually, which was a part of the inspiration of me getting into the generativity topic. So, when we talk about digital ecosystems, one of the topics that people talk about is its generativity. And we heard earlier that, one of the advantages of ecosystem, innovation ecosystem in particular, is that people do things that you never thought that you would do. And then, like, how did it happen? And then if the distance that you have to travel from what you thought about doing and what people are actually doing, it becomes even more disruptive, right? So the question that we have is that how does that happen, right? How does a digital ecosystem evolve over time to become more generative? And what are the possible roles that platform owner can play in this generative evolutionary process? So I'm going to show you a quick video clip. It's animation, there's no sound, which shows the history of WordPress. So some of you may use WordPress as users. The reason we use WordPress is one of the most popular content management software systems. It's because it has these plugins. They have like tens of thousands of plugins, and majority of them are developed by third-party complementers. So what I'm going to show you is the evolution of WordPress ecosystem from its conception until 2014, over 10 years. So can you click? I don't know if I click. Yeah. So this is 2014. Like a jump a little bit. What you're seeing here is that these little dots, blue dots are APIs created by WordPress. Red dots are APIs coming from external ecosystems. Connections are made when plugins are using these two APIs together to build an API. As you can see this like explosive growth of WordPress. Just nothing really substantial, just to give you an idea of what has happened with WordPress. So, WordPress ecosystem, again, it is an ecosystem of plugins. One way of looking at it is what we call combinatorial innovation. So the innovation is not coming out of someone sitting inside the office and the lab and writing every single code by themselves, but rather combining existing resources to create something new. In fact, when you think about the nature, that's how the nature has evolved. You have a 4-bit computer DNA that is repeated a million times, 3 billion base code, and then they are being repeated, and then creating proteins, and then genes and proteins. So the notion of generative innovation and coming out of the combinatorial innovation is a very important concept. So just to give you an idea of how WordPress system is evolved or created from a combinatorial innovation standpoint. So you have a plugin, and then that plugin is using 3 different APIs. And one of them, black one, is internal, and 2 of them are external. So now you have 3 different plugins, and then they have all different combinations. So with text mining, because WordPress is open source, we could actually go in and read every single plugin source code, and then identify every single API calls that these plugins make over the whole period of the WordPress existence. So that's what we pretty much did for our research. One of my doctoral students did it for his thesis. So this is a history of a number of APIs that WordPress systems had. When it first started, there were a total number of 44 APIs. By the time that we finished data collection 2014, there were 443 APIs used by the entire ecosystem. And the number of plugins that you see, at the beginning we had 86 plugins. By the time we ended, 23,000 plugins. So this is more numeric numbers, right? So 2004, 86 plugins, 40 internal APIs, and 4 external APIs, and total of 44, and all the way down to the bottom. So how do we do this? So it'll be a little bit geeky, so I'm going to just skip through. We do this using a matrix. So we create a 23,218 by 443 bimodal network. This is sort of like a gene expression network. So think of APIs as genes, and then these plugins as a species. And then each species share a different set of APIs. So we are trying to use this sort of network, system biology network language to characterize the design space. And then you have to do all sorts of interesting calculation. And then we came to this. So what we were able to look at was what we call speciation of WordPress, meaning that different species emerge from over time, from 86 to 23,000, and then they are not just 23,000, but there are different kinds of WordPress plugins emerging over time. So this is a 2014 record. So each color represents different types of plugins, and it is all based on the type of APIs they use. And then in order to validate this is actually the right way of classifying plugins, we also created another 11 distribution, the categories of plugins based on the description of these plugins using text mining. And then we did a k-means cluster analysis to cluster them into 11 clusters of plugins. So we have 2 independent distribution of plugins, 11 categories, and then we were asking whether they are statistically the same, and the result supports that they are pretty much the same. So then what does this mean? So let me show you another very beautiful chart. So on the top, there are 2 small zones. So the one on the left is internal API. On the right is external API. So if you zoom in, you could see every single APIs at the highest resolution level. And then the rest of the circus diagram, this is called a circus diagram, each segment of the circle represents different species. And then every dot in that circle, part of the circle, represents a particular plugin. And then that particular plugin represents different types of APIs that are being used. So this is a visualization of that ecosystem from sort of like a DNA of this WordPress ecosystem. Just to give you a sense of how fast this thing was growing. So 2004, 2005, 6. So this is the distribution of the heat map of the way different plugins are using different types of APIs together. So dark area is one that is sharing a lot of same APIs. So if you see different segments, that means different species, if you will, candidates. So then 2008, something happened, boom, double the size. And then 2008 is on the right, and then you can see 9, 10, 11. And then 11, 12, 13, 14. So you could see how rapidly WordPress grew in its size. But it is not just the size, just looking at the speciations over 10-year period. So from 2004 through 2006, we see only one species. Everyone is the same. But then 2006 and 2007 and 8, we begin to see the division. So a new cluster emerged. And then 2010, we saw 2 more species emerging. And then 11, we have 1 more. And then 12, we have 1 more. 13, we have 2 more. And then 14, we have 3 more. So what are the genes in this WordPress ecosystem? So we're trying to figure out who are these APIs. So again, without going into the details, we found 3 different types of genes, APIs. So we called a complete core, regular core, and pre-free core. Just to give a sense, the complete core APIs are the ones that you must have to exist in this ecosystem. You don't live in this ecosystem without these. And obviously, these are ones that are created by WordPress. And then the bottom one, I'm going to jump into the bottom one, what we call pre-free APIs. These pre-free APIs are the ones that are all created by the external developers mostly. And then these are the ones that create diversities within the species, the same species. So what is most interesting for us is the middle layer, what we call the regular core APIs. The regular core APIs are the ones, the crucial APIs that are creating new species. So we are talking about scale of scope, not just scale of the economy of scope, not just economy of scale. So if you want to have a scale, simply scale, you may just need a pre-free APIs. But if you really want to create diversity and heterogeneity or generativity in your own ecosystem, you really need to figure out how to create this middle layer, what we called regular core APIs. And then what we found was, so we actually tracked down who these are. About 20% of these regular core APIs are coming from external web services. So the combination of internal WordPress APIs and external APIs from powerful web ecosystems, such as some usual suspects like Facebook, Twitter, Amazon. These are their APIs are mixed with WordPress's APIs and creating this powerful species. And then we found some APIs that we never heard, but they are heavily used to create certain services, creating platform within platforms, for example. So what do we have here? What we have here is the 3 different layers of genes. So there's a genotype in biology and phenotype. So the phenotype is external physical diversity that we see in biosphere. And what we believe is that diversity that we observe in your physical attribute is produced in the gene level diversity, the recombination that happens in the gene level. So here, what we are arguing, the modeling, is that the genes, APIs, the digital resources, the recombination of those produces the differences that we observe in the marketplace. And so what should a platform owner do in this particular context? So, well, first of all, they should change their understanding of the platform ecosystem slightly. Throughout the day, we heard that platform has 2 sides. We have one side, third-party complementers or providers. On the other side, we have users. We found there is a third leg of ecosystem, which is API builders, or these could be the builders of digital resources. And not all digital resources and APIs should come from you alone. APIs are very important, and open APIs are important. That is given, right? But if you only leverage your own APIs, open APIs, you're not going to create a very generative ecosystem. You got to encourage other ecosystems, APIs, invade your own ecosystem to remain generative, to become robust and strong. So, what are the roles that owners' APIs play? We call them boundary resources in theory, right? In theoretical term of these APIs is types of boundary resources. So what do boundary resources actually do? Boundary resources are situated at the boundary between the firm and the market. That's one way of thinking about it. But at the same time, the core boundaries are the ones that sets the boundary of the ecosystem. So the platform owners are using these core boundary resources to tell the world that these are the things that are permitted and not permitted in my ecosystem. So you're controlling both sides of the boundaries using your core boundary resources. But at the same time, they have to understand that they have to allow, almost like a marriage between 2 families, in order to create diversities in the human race. So you have to deliberately look for a way of allowing external APIs come in and thrive in your ecosystem. So some of the platform owners have done something, not so wise things, like for instance, like Twitter shut down the ability for other APIs to come in and play with their ecosystem. That is not a good idea if you want to promote more diversities and generativity in your ecosystem. And finally, the external APIs are the crucial digital resources in building robust diversity in your ecosystem. So that's all I have. Any questions? Thank you. Yes, sir.
So using your analogy, when you saw that new phenotypes were being created in those years, was there a trigger mutation API that drove that? Did you find in your research there were certain types of APIs that pushed into a new phenotype?
So there are two questions. There are a group of 2008 is a year that there is the sharp increase in the number of external APIs invading. So there's a quantitative difference in the external APIs coming in. If you read Tom Friedman's book, Sorry for Being Late, something like that, he talks about the year 2007, 6, 7, 8 being very pivotal years for the whole digital internet ecosystem. That's when GitHub was created, and there are a whole bunch of other things happen. So I think the ecosystem just got very robust. And the WordPress founder was smart enough not to shut down these very active activities coming from outside and just keep it away. Can we pick a specific APIs that were more pivotal in creating new species? So that is active research project that we are currently looking at. So it is dynamic sort of edge formation calculation kind of model, big data modeling. So how can we? So not all APIs are created equal. So essentially that's the question. So what are the good APIs? So if I'm the platform owner, I'd like to see which one. So that's still ongoing research question. Okay. Okay. Yes.
I wonder if the diversity in this ecosystem ever becomes detrimental to value creation and value capture. So is the assumption that diversity is always good?
Excellent question, right? So I think we found two surprises here. The WordPress ecosystem was not as generative as we thought it was, right? It was only 11 different types of the plugins after all. So a lot of it is just copycats. Number two, I think there is basically the negative, the network effect when you have too many similar plugins, and so then people just search cost goes up and so on. So I think there is a this quadratic function in terms of value. So you want to the diversity you should think about. Diversity of different kinds and diversity within the same categories. And so you may want to increase a diversity of different kinds while you want to put some break for diversity of the same kind. All right? You guys can fight out and
share the mic.
You can talk at the same time.
Question. Oh, well, the first was really trivial, which is, where's the paper? This looks interesting. The second was, how do you decide what to expose and what not to expose? You could have strategic things that you may want to keep closed and things that you might want to keep open. So how do you decide what you're going to allow others to generate and what are you going to keep for yourself?
So
okay, can I be the marshal, because I mean it's very related. I mean it's a border of the question. Yeah. And the second, how do they evolve? I mean, so this layer, it might evolve as well, so they might retain and bring back, what is strategic.
Right. So there's a lot of nuances in understanding the first of the paper is in the 3rd round in management science. So please tell the reviewers to hurry up so that if you're here. And there are, so when you look at the core APIs, these are very simple, almost like a living, breathing kind of API. You just simply cannot exist on the platform. So if you look at the evolution of the number of APIs, the WordPress stopped adding, or it slowed down the addition of APIs quite radically once it reached a certain point. So, they really topped out what they could think about providing to the developers world. And then the other things were really like additional functions and features and integration with external services. And I think that is the most crucial one. So instead of them creating plugins for Twitter, even if that becomes very popular and they may think of it as an essential, they do not necessarily jump right in. So these are I think one of the positions, like thinking about what is really at the core of the integrity of the operation of the platform versus at the periphery level of allowing the plugins to grow. And then there are, what we have not yet analyzed is that these API themselves are revised. And so that is another data point you can take a look, right? So what are the additional functions and features added to these APIs so that you could analyze them further down, which we just haven't been able to do. So thank you.